Hi everybody, Chris here from Skeleton. So today's video is going to be a little different than previous videos we've released. The reason being is we have kind of a big update, as you can kind of see on the screen. Skeleton v3 has now reached our beta status, which means that it is now primarily, feature complete, and the things, at least the features that we plan to ship for launch. There's still some things coming, and that's why we're not at the full release yet. But we wanted to kind of let you know that, hey, we've reached this kind of milestone, and help you update your projects and get your projects running to the latest version. And so the first thing you're going to want to do is just kind of go through this announcement. You're going to notice this says work in progress. I'm recording this a little before release day, so just don't worry about any of that. All that should be taken care of by the time you see this video. But you'll see that the announcement kind of covers things in details. How do I see the documentation for the update, the new documentation site? How do I see the new theme generator? If you want to keep up with any announcements or anything like that? How to install for a new project? On and on and on. There's quite a lot in here, including a detailed breakdown of what changes are coming in v3. And so a lot of this is information we've provided previously, just fine-tuned and really improved and kind of updated with some of the things that have changed since the prior kind of version, since the pre-release itself kind of came out. We're now kind of moving from that alpha or MVP stage to something that's a little bit more, a little more polished, a little more stable, and a little closer to what you're going to expect to see at release. So again, please go through that announcement. There's lots of information, including an FAQ here at the bottom that will cover everything you need to know as far as what does beta mean for us? Is this ready for production? On and on and on. It's all there. Please do go check that out. But what I want to really call out today is this portion right here, the migration guide. Because what we have done previously is we've recommended anybody that's wanting to come in and test Skeleton v2 that they do so, but they create a new project when they do so. That's changing today with the beta. With the beta, we're now providing an actual dedicated migration guide. You can see that here on the screen. So what this is doing is really just kind of holding your hands through what do I need to do to get from my current iteration of the project to everything updated and ready to go with Skeleton v3. And of course, using the new Skeleton v3 features and themes and all of that fun stuff. And so this kind of covers that in, pretty excruciating detail up until a certain point, which I'll kind of explain in just a moment. But you can see it's quite a lengthy guide. And so that's what the whole point of today's video is. Today we're going to just cover what does it actually look like to migrate a project, an existing project. And so the project we're going to update today is this one. It's the Skeleton Labs company website. So Skeleton Labs, if you're not familiar, is the company that myself and my business partner run that handles things like sponsorship, paying hosting services, all those behind the scenes things that need to happen to keep an open source project running. The website just talks about the company, talks about myself and my partner, and just lets you know who we are and what we're doing. It's a very small site. There's only a few pages here, not too much going on as far as that. And, it's got a couple of things that are, very skeleton specific. It's got an accordion. It's got use of some of the buttons here. If we come look here, we've got the avatar to show myself and Trey. So, just a few things going on, inputs, things like that. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to see some changes for in the new version. And so we need to kind of go through and make sure all of that is updated. And so what I've done to prepare for that is just do a quick audit. And so you're going to see a list on the screen here where I've gone through and kind of audited what do we need for the site to be ready to go. So the first thing is we are actually already running Svelte 5. We're just running a pre-release version. So we'll need to bump that up to the full final release, whatever the latest version of that is. Some of the dependencies are a bit dated, including Skeleton itself. So we're going to need to update those to the latest version just to kind of prepare and get everything kind of up to date and most modern version we can before we go to the new side of things. And then there's several features I was just calling out. Things like the accordion, the avatar, various utility classes like buttons. The layout is controlled with AppShell, which has seen kind of a big change in v3. So that's going to be probably one of the more involved processes we go through here. And then features like Toast, which We don't quite have a solution for toast literally today in V3, but tomorrow, with the announcement and the release of the new version, we do have our new toast solution coming live. But it's just not quite available to me, so we'll just kind of stub that out, do an alert or something like that. I think it's only used very briefly on the contact page when you like submit a form. It just puts a little message and says, "Hey, that was received. Thank you." The other thing we're going to need to do is update the theme. So the theme itself, you're going to see, is using kind of our older style, like the V2 style legacy skeleton theme is what we called it. This one that you see with the kind of blues and the pinks and stuff like that. The new version of Skeleton uses Cerberus is the name of the theme. This kind of dark and moody, it's kind of super edgy looking theme with the like nice blue colors for the primary and things like that. That's going to be what we're going to update to. So we're going to update not only the classes and the utilities and stuff, but we're going to update the theme as well. So really the best place to start for this is just to kind of come into and look at the migration guide. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to go over it real quick, and then we're going to kind of use this as reference as we go. And so a couple of things I just have to call out, they're kind of, in big bold letters here at the top, kind of a bit of a disclaimer. Skeleton v3 beta is not quite ready for production use. That does mean, like I said earlier, we're mostly feature complete, but there's a few odds and ends we still need to put in. There's a few things we need to polish. There could be some, minor breaking changes between now and the release candidate. So it's not quite there, but it's in a state that we do feel that people can start, testing, can start getting ready for, can start migrating, and kind of getting all that ready for the full release coming in, next couple, a few weeks from now. I'm not going to give a specific date yet. Just mentioning there's bugs, there's potential issues there. And, the other thing I'm going to point out right out up front is that while we are providing a migration guide, I would like you to kind of judge for yourself, for your project, if a migration is right for you. Because giving the scale and scope of changes, you might kind of watch what we're doing today and be like, oh, that's too much. There's way too much to update. And that's at that point, what we would probably recommend is you do a rewrite of your application, your client-side application. So it's a heavier lift, not always very fun to do, but you understand the stakes of your application. That's a decision for you to make. As far as frameworks that we're going to target, historically Skeleton's only supported SvelteKit, so this guide is all geared towards Svelte and SvelteKit. If you're coming from, say, a React world or something like that, we are supporting that in V3, but you should just start with the new onboarding. So just kind of go through and install for Next or the Vite application, the Vite onboarding guide that we'll be adding in the near future. Yeah, you get to start fresh. As far as like tips for migrating, we're just putting a few things out here. Things like make sure you create a dedicated branch, so if something goes wrong, you can kind of just nix that and kind of start over. Use your the documentation that we provide. That's going to be a good source of truth for everything, and really just kind of pace yourself. There's a lot of updates, as you'll see as we kind of go through this, and just make sure you understand that kind of up front and give yourself enough time to make that happen. It could, for larger scale applications, this could be, considered several days, to really kind of get through this process. So prerequisites we kind of talked about previously, Svelte 5 and so on. We do link to a guide if you have not yet updated your V2 project to use Svelte 5. So if you need to, just click that link, follow that. That'll be outside of scope of today's video, just to keep this a little shorter. But you should follow that, and it's a very minor process, but it is a process that you will want to go through to make sure you're in good state. Make sure everything's, all your dependencies are up to date, and then really this is the critical thing before you begin is just make sure your application is in a functional state before you start changing things. And that just ensures that, hey, there wasn't a breaking change in dependency or something that I didn't catch before I got halfway through the migration process, and then, you're tearing your hair out. Again, I'll caution that this is a very early release. It's a beta, but it still has, bugs and issues. And so really, the main thing here to kind of keep in mind is, there is such a large scope of changes that we can't cover every single change like we did with migration guides in the past. If you made the jump from Skeleton v1 to v2, you might remember the migration guide for that. It was, about a page or a couple pages in length, and there was a handful of components that changed and a few things that were removed. this is on a kind of a different level. There's quite a bit more involved. And so we can't cover, again, all the specifics, but we're going to show you all the categories of things that changed and kind of give you a story to kind of go through of like, here's what I'm working on. Okay, it's not clearly like needs to migrate. Where do I go find the new information? Where do I find that in the documentation? How do I fix that? How do I improve that? That'll be what the guide is. So without further ado, before we get into like the actual migration itself, let's just start making sure that we have these kind of prerequisites taken care of. And so again, if we jump back over to my list here, I've kind of created a couple kind of steps to prepare for things. And so the very first thing I'm going to do is just make sure that the application is working. So I've got everything kind of cloned down locally. I'm going to look over here. Okay, and I'm going to notice that I'm currently on my staging branch. And so if we kind of take advantage of the tips that I just provided, what I'd really like to do is create a kind of dedicated branch for this. And so if your project's on GitHub, this is kind of the process I like to do. I'm going to call it Migrate to Skeleton v3. And I'm not going to do this too fancy. This is just for myself and for my own reference. I'm going to create a new issue, and then you can create a new branch here. And so I just like the branch system that GitHub provides us. It's very simple, works very well. Just make sure that we're starting from the staging branch as our source. And then I'm going to do migrate to skeleton v3 as the branch name here. I'm going to do this as, I think we use kind of a naming convention, so I'm just going to put that in front. Everything else looks good. So I'm just going to copy these commands it gives me, drop those into my terminal. So there's one. It's just pulling down the new branch with fetch. And all right, so our local project is running. I'm going to close the remote one so that it's not confusing us here. You're going to see everything's kind of running here. I can jump between the routes. All that is good and well. If I come into the actual code base here, which I have already pulled up in VS Code here, you can kind of see the general structure. We have, a layout here. We've got a server that's pulling in some Vercel information here. We've got the main, homepage itself. It's always nice to just verify things are working. So I'm just going to put, working, and let's go look. And then there we go. There's the text on the page that I just added. So that is working. I can remove that text. It's reverted. It's good to go. Okay. So let's go ahead and go to updating the version of Svelte. And so that's an easy one. So we're going to just run a couple commands here. So I'm just going to do pnpm remove Svelte. That'll remove the current package. You can do update, but since it's a major release, I tend to like to do it this way. Hopefully that's nothing important there. Okay, we're going to add. Okay, and then we're going to do pnpm list just to verify that we're running the latest version. If we come in here and look, yep, there we go. We're on 5.1.19. Looks like 9. Yeah, 9. So new version on there. Previously, it was the at next tagged version, which meant it was the pre-release. So that is up to date. Again, I like to verify. We're going to just run and see if we kind of get any server errors here. I'm going to grab this, and we're going to go back over to our browser here and refresh the application and look that all is well. Yep. So it looks like running the latest stable version of Svelte 5 is working as expected. So that's great. If I was really going to go kind of in depth, I would test, features. I would test the form. I'd go kind of to that degree. But again, this is just a kind of a quick and easy test. One thing you might be seeing is if you're coming from an older version of Skeleton like I am, I'm seeing quite a lot of information kind of, dumped into the log here. A lot of this is regarding accessibility changes that we've improved. Essentially what happened was Svelte has kind of moved to where they do more kind of validation or more testing against, hey, are you using correct accessibility for this? Are you using, click tag where you should, or a click event where you shouldn't on like a div or something like that, and it'll kind of inform you of that. And so a lot of those things are related to that. Main thing and the main takeaway from all that is you can just kind of ignore those. Those are things that are already fixed in newer versions of Skeleton and newer versions, especially the V3 version. Those things should be completely solved. So we're just going to stop our server. We're just going to kind of clear to get that stuff out of our way. And I'm going to commit those changes. So we're just going to do this incrementally. So I'm going to add commit, and we're going to just say updated to the Svelte 5 full release. There we go. I'm going to push those changes just to go ahead and get them off my machine, just in case we ever need to revert. And then I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do PMPM up, which is update. What this is doing is this going to essentially just update all of our dependencies to the latest version. In fact, we can do outdated here to check what is outdated. So you can see there's a lot of stuff that's fine, you know, this auto prefixer and things like that. And then these versions down here, these are things that are out of date. So node's out of date, yes, lent's out of date, so on and so forth. Tailwind forms is updated slightly, that kind of thing. And so we're going to go ahead and just do that. We're going to go ahead and go up, and that's just telling it update all of those kind of out-of-date dependencies here. We're going to let that run. The npm commands for those will vary a little bit, but again, that's a little bit out of scope of what we're teaching today. But I just want to mention that in case you're like, oh, I don't use PMPM. I don't know what the equivalent commands are. So let's go ahead and do that. I always like to kind of come into my commits here and just kind of look at the packages and just kind of see, you know, quickly scan what's updated. So we can see Skeleton has updated to the latest version. 2.10.3 is the latest release of Skeleton v2. So that's good. Tailwind Forms is updated, on and on. All that looks great. So we're going to go ahead and do, again, just kind of a quick litmus test, just kind of run our server and just make sure all those changes are working, because you never know when a third-party dependency is going to slip in like a little breaking change in there, you know, kind of get you off guard. And so we're going to refresh. Looks like the server's running, and that looks to be in good shape. In fact, if we look here, you're going to see there's much less noise as far as like accessibility errors and stuff like that. And that's, again, that update to a newer version of Skeleton has sorted most of those. There's still a couple we missed. Sorry about that. But most of those things are in place. So with that, I think our project is basically up to date and ready to migrate to Skeleton v3. And so I'm going to, again, kind of, you know, commit these changes. We'll let deps updated, push those changes. There we go. So it was off screen. Sorry about that, but I just committed and pushed those changes right here. So you can see committing, push, that kind of stuff. Okay. So that kind of completes this little checklist of kind of preparing for V2. So pretty quick and easy so far. Again, a lot of that's covered in that migration guide. If you need to migrate to Svelte 5, all of that is covered in there. It's a much simpler process than you might be thinking. There's really no breaking changes, and the reason for that is that the API for components, you know, Svelte 4 API components, component APIs have not changed or are still compatible or, you know, backwards compatible in Svelte 5, which means it should be a fairly seamless update for the Svelte side of things. Now, again, the changes that we're going to undergo and the migration we're going to go, that's mostly the changes to moving from those Svelte 4 APIs to those Svelte 5 APIs. So a lot of the stuff we're about to run into, that's where that kind of comes from, okay? Okay, so let's jump back to our handy migration guide. We've essentially run down all the prerequisites. We've verified our application is running, so we're good. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to uninstall two packages that are related to Skeleton. One of them, the first one here, is the core Skeleton package. The second one is the TW plugin. That's Tailwind plugin. And so the roles of these packages have changed. What we've essentially done is the core package is now the plugin. So this gets moved into here, and then to replace it, we have a new package that is the component libraries themselves. So this previously held components, this held the plugin. Those are flip-flop. They're the other way around. And the reason we've done that is because we want to kind of continuously, you know, add new component libraries, and so we need those additional packages. So we've got the React package, and eventually maybe a Vue package, and a Solid.js package, and so on. So we need that to grow. And so really the core of Skeleton is the plugin anyways. So it just made sense to make that change. So what we're going to do to prepare for this is we're just going to copy this command here. I'm using PNPM, so I'm going to add a little P at the beginning of the command here and just remove those two packages. Okay, so the application won't be in a functional state here because Obviously, we've just removed pretty critical features for Skeleton to operate here. So we'll go back to the migration guide and see what it recommends we do next. And so it says to start from step 2 and go forward on the onboarding guide, which is the guide you use if you're creating a new project. So typically you would scaffold a new skeleton project with a skeleton CLI called SV. We don't need to do that. We already have an existing project. We just need to install the new component packages, which is what we were just talking about. So I'm going to grab the command for this. Again, I'm going to come into my terminal. I'm going to add a little P at the beginning, and that's PNPM I for install, and then the packages, the 2 packages. So you can see there's the core package there is the first one listed, the Svelte version. This is the component package here, so Tailwind and components. And then we're using the @next tag to indicate that this is a kind of early or pre-release version of Skeleton. Even though we're now calling it a beta, it's still going to be on that like tagged extra version. And it'll stay that way right up until release. So when we hit release, we'll install the version of the package that's not coming from the next tag, okay? So we're going to run that, and that's going to install the replacement packages for the core and for the plugin, or excuse me, for the components. Okay, and then if we kind of look at what the next steps are, it does recommend we go ahead and install the types for Node here. The reason for that is it just prevents some type errors that you could sometimes see in the Tailwind config file. So I'm just going to grab that command, drop that in here, install that package real quick. Okay, that should be good. And then finally, we're going to come in and look and say, okay, so we need to update our Svelte config. There's some changes kind of listed in here that are very specific to these changes. And so I'm going to come into our project here. I think we're done with our little checklist here, so I'll close that out. You can see our packages have been updated here, so that's kind of the stuff we've got in progress. And then there's our Tailwind config to match what is displayed here. So I'm going to do a few things here. I'm going to, in fact, I think I might just, we'll just kind of copy the bits we need here. So we're going to, I'm just kind of comparing the two. So I'm going to record, my version's a little further away from the version that's listed here. It's expecting kind of if you install a new project today, that's the structure it would look like over here. So what we're going to do is just kind of make sure we match that. So I'm just going to make sure we're copying the config here, which is setting sort of the typing information for that. I'm going to copy this from off screen just to make sure this is accurate and correct. And then we're going to change the structure of this a little bit. In fact, I'll just to keep it simple, I'm just going to try to copy the whole file. We'll just make sure the whole thing works. Okay, so let's see. It's still complaining about the config. It's never read, which is not quite right. It's definitely used here. Okay, so let's do this. Let's save, and I'm going to restart. Could just be like TypeScript hasn't updated with those types we just installed just a moment ago. Yeah, still there. Okay, we'll see. We'll come back to this and we'll see if this gives us any trouble. Again, we're doing this live. We're doing this, intentionally to see what kind of issues a user might kind of run into in this process. Okay, the last step we really need to do here is just make sure we're using our new theme. And so the way themes work in V3 is you import them from Skeleton if you're using one of the presets, one of the ones we provide. You have this themes, array here, and we're just going to insert the themes that we're actively using. So I'm not going to be using the roast theme, so I'm going to remove that. But you know what? We'll leave it there just so we can see this in practice. So Cerberus is the theme we're going to want actively displayed. I'm going to open my source app.html file, which is where my body, like the kind of main entry point for your application is. There's your body tag, and then there's the theme. And so previously we were using that skeleton theme. We're now going to switch that to Cerberus, like we were just saying, and we're going to save that. So that should complete all of the onboarding steps listed here. Now, if I was to start running if I start to use this command and I run my local dev server, let's try it. We're going to see how many errors we can generate because something tells me there will be a lot. So if it will even start, let's say, so we're already kind of getting hit. If we come and look at the page, it's going to say, hey, we don't understand Skeleton, the import for this core package is not right. Toast is not recognized. We don't understand that import. So right at the beginning of the root layout, it starts to fail. So we'll close our kind of dev server over here, clear that out, and then we'll start doing some of the migration here. So we returned our application. The server is ended. So good. We're in good shape there. Okay. Next step here, we've completed all the steps. It just kind of talks you through what we're changing there. And then we've updated our theme. We just talked about that. That's part of the onboarding. We updated our theme. If you're using a preset, we do have lots of options for themes. You can come in here and see kind of any of the options provided here. So if you want Cerberus, you can use that. If you want Nouveau or whatever, you can pick that. And in fact, you can click that and it'll copy that to your clipboard. So if we paste that, you're going to see it copies that term that we've actually done. So it makes it just easier to go and paste it wherever you need to put that in place in the Tailwind config or your app, HTML file or whatever. Okay, so that's preset themes, really easy. If you need to update your if you have a V2 theme that you created yourself, like a custom theme, there are going to be a few extra steps involved with that. The main thing is you're going to want to come into the theme generator. So if you're not sure where that's located, you can just come to our docs, next.skeleton.dev. You click the themes button. That's going to open the generator. The generator has the option to create a brand new theme from scratch, which is what you're seeing here, or you can import a theme. And so you can import any of our themes to use as kind of a foundation to build off of, or you can kind of literally drag and drop your theme file from your previous iteration into this little field here, and it will populate and use all those colors. I don't have a theme handy to test that right offhand, but it should work. If you have any problems with that, obviously reach out in our support section, okay? But what it's going to do is essentially I'm going to click one of these to kind of simulate it. It's going to just basically populate the colors and a few settings. It won't be everything because V3 adds a lot of new settings. So you may still want to kind of come through here and tweak and adjust and kind of make use of those new settings that we provide for your theme. Just kind of update it to the new standard. And then when you're ready, hit the code tab here, and there's a little copy button that you can copy, whatever output of your theme is there, and then just follow the instructions, listed on here from custom themes down to install that. We have all that documented on the website. It links it and kind of walks you through the process in that little step-by-step guide here. Okay. Again, make sure you don't forget to update your data theme and your body tag. That's one of the things I always forget. So just putting that in there as a reminder. And then the next thing, this is kind of that part I told you was going to be a little bit intensive in that we need to update our layouts. And so if we go and we look at the reason why we got rid of the AppShell, which is something that people really kind of, especially new users to the web, they would come in and they'd use this. And the feature was nice because what it was doing was providing just a canned way to do a bunch of different layouts. And so we come in here and we look, we can say, oh yeah, we can have a layout where we have a header, we have a sidebar, maybe we have a right sidebar, maybe we want a fixed header, or we don't want a fixed header, or something like that. You can kind of configure that very quickly and easily, and then just have this kind of component and code you threw on your layout file inside of SvelteKit, and just run from that. While the convenience of that was really nice, the problems it introduced were pretty major. And so we've had this feature for a couple of years, and we've had a lot of negative issues kind of come up around it. And so I won't go too far into that. Just know, if you want, we've linked to that list if you want to kind of look into some of that. But as far as the migration guide is concerned, we're just essentially pointing you to our new V3 solution. So if we click this Layouts button here, it's going to take us to the Layout docs on Skeleton V3's docs here. And so what we've done is provide a very extensive guide of how layouts are typically structured for the web. And we just use it with, basic, Skeleton, or not even Skeleton, but Tailwind provided utility classes to style and control that with grid layout and things like that. So it's a great intro if you're not familiar with a lot of that process. It is kind of in-depth, so there's a lot to kind of go through. You don't have to know every one of these details that we're providing. We're just trying to provide you more information than you need than the other way around. And then really kind of the key thing is this portion down here, which is we provide canned, versions of these layouts that you can just copy paste if you're like, hey, I don't care about all the history and details and whatever, just show me how to do it. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to come into our application. We're going to go into the routes and the route layout here, and we can see right there we have our AppShell. So our AppShell has essentially three parts. One, it's using the component itself. It's got the header, it's got the footer, and it's got the page content. And so the only tricky bit here is the the header is sticky, and so we're applying some styles to make that sticky. And so we have a perfect solution or perfect drop-in option for this, which is this option here, the one column layout that has the header, footer, and just works exactly like you would expect it to. And so if we look, I think we have a couple options. Yeah, this one right here with the sticky header, that's the version we want right there. Because if we scroll, that's exactly how our page, was operating here. If I come in Skeleton Labs, fixed header, scrollable page, and then fixed, or not fixed, but scrollable footer at the bottom there too. Okay, so that's the version we want. You can read through the details here if you want to understand how the styling and things like that are working, but all we really care about is just implementing that as our replacement. So I'm just going to copy that. You can kind of see the preview here. I'm going to copy that code. We're going to take that. We're going to drop that right in here, and we're just going to start replacing, right? So we're going to say, okay, so here's, our layout structure. We're going to say, okay, in the header, we had, the header content here, so let's put that in place. We may need to modify a few of these styles, so we'll look at it once we get in place. We need the default slot for the page, which is where, the main sections where all your content kind of goes. So we're going to drop that in there. And then we're going to grab the footer and drop it in this position here. Okay. And with all that, we should be able to remove the AppShell. Remove here. Yeah. And in fact, I'm going to remove the toasts as well, because like we were talking about earlier, those are no longer valid, or it's no longer something we're utilizing. So anything related to toasts, including this, can just be nixed, can just go away. Okay. And so we're actually importing our header as component and our footer as a component. Those are present here. We've got a page slot that we're using for this. We do have these colors, which is probably something we're not going to need. So we're just going to leave that temporarily just to kind of see how things are laid out. We'll just remove it for now. We can always add it back if we need it, because I think all those styles are built into the versions that I'm using here. So if I open the header, you can see, yeah, it's got padding built into the header itself, things like that. So we shouldn't need to add those styles. We just need the different rows, if you will. So I'm going to save that change. All right, that's good. Make sure that everything is kind of aligning properly here. I don't think I have prettier set up properly on this project, so that might explain why I'm expecting that to, change on save. So something else to look into later. Okay, there we go. Let's go back and look at our next step. So we've done that. We've replaced our layout. If you have multiple layout throughout your application, make sure you update those just the same. But, the general concept is going to be very similar. There is one more thing we'll need to change, which is, I'll go ahead and point it out here because I know it'll catch us later. We're using a slot, but that's a Svelte 4 component API. So with Svelte 5, they've now introduced the concept of runes, right? And so as part of runes, you can pass snippets, and snippets are kind of, think of it sort of a replacement for slots. They work a little bit similar, but also have their own kind of use cases. But it's essentially, that's what we need to do. We need to migrate it from a slot to a snippet. Okay. As far as like updating utility classes and things like that, there's quite a bit of that involved. Before we do that, I think what I'm going to do is, I know I'm jumping back and forth here, but I want to try to get the application in a somewhat functional state. So I'm going to come back in here in the code. Remember, we just nixed the toast stuff. So if I come and look at my contact page that we have, I think that's where we were using the toast. Yeah, you can see it kind of being imported and used here. So we have several components that are imported here. We're no longer doing that. We're no longer using the toast store. And then we're no longer, we no longer going to do that. There we go. Okay, so we'll just temporarily put a window alert there just to replace that. It's not a perfect replacement for the toast, but again, the toast feature is coming as part of the updates you're going to see while you're seeing this video and seeing the updates. So we'll come back and update that as part of this. If I see anything that's challenging or anything like that, maybe I can put a message in the comments of how I tackled that. Okay. I'm going to come back here. It's still going to be yelling about components that don't exist and things like that. Yeah, so that's there. If we look at the application, yeah, here comes some errors. Oh, we have some interesting theme going. But you can start to see some of that is in place. So we have our header bars up here. We've got our footer bars down here. The page itself is failing because of components that the Accordion component is used on the home page there, right? And that is not updated yet. So we need to fix that. So we kind of are building our little to-do list here. If we come and look at the messages, I was just kind of curious how like verbose or how kind of on the nose they would be. So it's going to say, okay, yeah, there's a self-closing tag that needs to be fixed. So that's Svelte validation. That's not necessarily a component. Yeah, we're doing imports from this package, which is, remember, we switched the packages. That should no longer be the core package, the /skeleton package. That should be, any component should come from /skeleton-svelte, the Svelte component library. Okay, so that may be a good way for us to go and check where we need to upgrade our components. So I'm gonna copy that. I'm gonna go into our code base here. I'm just gonna close a couple of these pages we're not using right now. It looks like the config is working here, so I'm not gonna stress about that. It's probably just a false positive kind of thing. And we're gonna look through our kind of application here. We're gonna search for anywhere we're using, that package. And so, so that obviously we're still using it in the package.json. We're using the Svelte version, which is the component library, which is what we want to do. You're going to see these are going to be tagged with next versions, which are similar to what Svelte was doing. It just means that, hey, we're in a pre-release state right now. That's our lock file, so we don't need to make any changes there. This is the imports for the actual themes and the plugin in the config file. We want to leave all that. We do want to look here. Yeah, so this is our home page, and so it looks like we're using an accordion on that page that we were talking about previously, right? That component doesn't come from that package anymore, and that component doesn't necessarily follow the same structure as that used. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment that, and I'm going to comment the component down here. It's pretty long, so there's a lot going on. In fact, I'm going to just copy it and move it to its own file temporarily so we can kind of reference it separately. And I'm just going to put a little message here, fix me accordion, and then just put a little on-screen message that lets me know where that component was. I'm going to save that, and we're going to come back over here and look. And sure enough, our website is looking different. I'm not going to say it's looking right yet. It's not looking proper, but it is looking different. Okay, so we do have some stuff. There's an issue with the scroll. It's not letting me scroll. And I think a lot of what our issues are coming from, obviously the colors look weird, right, compared to the V3 docs. So I think a lot of our issues that we're seeing there are related to our app style sheet. So if we come in here, I have an app.postcss file. The extension may be a little different for you. It might be PCSS or CSS. And I'm going to look. We do actually have several customizations here. So the first of which, it looks like it's changing some of the base styles for a theme, the skeleton theme. We're no longer doing that. That could go. We're changing and inputting kind of a custom gradient background on the body. And so we don't necessarily need to do that anymore. In fact, that should only really be applied to the body. So we'll come back and do that. I want to have that gradient, but I don't think that's the right settings for that gradient. And then we look like we're modifying the page container a little bit. And so I'm just gonna nix that and save that and see what that does for us. And so if we come back and look at our application, sure enough, there we go. We can now scroll because of the looks like one of the changes. Yeah, the body change here. It looks like we were doing removing the scrollability, which is part of the prerequisites for the AppShell. We fixed that, and now we can scroll the page with our new kind of custom layout. We can see the headers going behind, the headers overlapping. It looks like there's some little odds and ends here that look a little off. I'm gonna go to skeleton. Let's compare to the live site, right? So colors are obviously off, some things to tweak there. Typography is mostly right. This looks a little funky here, right? So we'll need to fix that. The buttons are obviously not working because the actual button classes, some of the styling for those has changed. And then obviously the accordion has been disabled down here, so that will need to be fixed. So there's a few things already that we can kind of fix just on our homepage. And so let's see if we can do that. I do like the animation though. That's kind of cool. We'll see if we might need to tone it down. It's a little strong, but I do like that it's, that's still functionally working. And it's pulling from our theme. And the reason that's working is it's pulling from the color values that are still applicable. Those are still the names of the color values that we use have not changed. So some things like that will continue to work. Okay, so that's cool. The other thing, and I'm going to point this out before we go too far, is if we open our system settings. I'm going to do this off screen so it doesn't leak any of my personal information. Just looking like, everything looks good. I currently roll, my OS operating system, light and dark mode settings. I do dark mode, but if we switch to light, we're going to see, hey, the application is switching to the light mode version as well, which is kind of cool. So the reason that is happening, I can kind of point that out. We'll kind of jump between. There's an auto mode, I think, which is based on like time or something like that. The reason that's working is if we come back to our Tailwind config and we look right here, we do not have any kind of inclination of like how it should operate for light and dark mode from Tailwind side of things. So if we look at our v3 docs, we have a little section that talks about this. We go to dark mode here. There's basically two settings that you can use in Tailwind to do this. And so they use kind of a dark mode as the name of the class itself. And then there's two values you can use. You can use either selector. And what selector does is it says, hey, I'm going to manually tell you when the page should change from light and dark mode. And it does that by adding a little selector class, a dark class, onto your HTML element in the root of your application, right? That's what that's what you do if you want to have like a light and dark picker, things like that. But if you don't do that, the default setting is one called media. And by default, media just looks at your operating system's preference and just pulls from that. And so if we don't specify a dark mode setting, we don't specify that, that particular dark mode selector or dark mode media, it just picks media for us automatically, which means that we get what we just saw, where the operating system will influence what light or dark mode that's in. So I don't really like putting a light and dark mode selector if I don't have to. I kind of like the idea of the site just being kind of at your preference when you come to it. So we're just going to leave that selector off. So again, we're pretty close. We're getting, a pretty good head start here. Again, there's some things that are off. I don't like that everything kind of feels very cramped. And so I think what I might do is revert this change here, which I think was what was squeezing the page. Oops, sorry. Switching the page here. Yeah, this page container. Yeah, so that's changing how wide the page can be. Based on whatever the breakpoints are. It changes width and uses a container class. What's the padding? Things like that. So if we come over here and look, sure enough, now everything's kind of confined. It's not bumping up against the edges of the page. These are just custom styles that I implemented, but again, I want to point this out because you may have done this as well on your application. You may have added your own custom style sheet. So if you've done that, my recommendation is to just come in here and just kind of turn those things off and then turn them on slowly one by one until you recognize what they're doing and how you want them to be applied. And so this one, we want to keep that. So we're going to put that back on and leave that there. Eventually, we will update this to use the new gradient. In fact, we can do that really quick while we're here. So I'm just going to come to the documentation site and draw from the resources from what I already have here. So we're going to come in here and look at styles. Yep, there we go. And then we're going to say if it is Cerberus, we're going to use this style right here. And then we'll come back in here, and I'm going to paste these in here. Okay, remove the comments. There we go. So if I save that, I'm going to come back over to the site, and you're going to see this. This is the after. I'm going to turn it back off real quick. So that's with the gradient off, and then that is with the gradient on. It's a very subtle thing. You're just barely seeing it here at the top of the page. This kind of loose gradient right up here. May not even pick up really well on the video capture, but you get the idea. But again, there's a few things still missing. Our accordion is still missing here. Our button styles are off. On and on and on. So we're gonna come back to our styles. I think we're gonna call these good for now. We're going to look in here in our page, and let's just look for any kind of use case to the button. Okay, so the thing that's kind of changed here, the thing that you may be noticing here, is that these are using variant classes to define the style. So what are variant classes? So if you come back and look at the Skeleton V2 docs, we can come in here and look at variants. You could search for that if you weren't sure where that was located. But these are just canned styles that we're doing, providing that do a few things. In the case of V2, it takes the base color, so like primary color 500, and then it makes sure it has the contrasting tone for the text, so that there's always that like contrast ratio that you want, right? And that works pretty well. There's a handful of options for filled. There's kind of a ghost variant, soft variant, on and on and on. Quite a few options in that. If we come and look at V3, there's less categories of options for these, but they're more refined. And so if we look at presets, presets are the replacement for variants. So this is probably one of those changes you're going to be making a lot because you use those classes a lot through your application. You may have like hundreds of buttons, right? So the main thing to take away is just, hey, if we need to, fix that variant, we should try to replace those kind of in bulk, right? We should try to change those anywhere we see something like variant soft. Maybe we replace that with the V3 equivalent, which would probably be the tunnel style. So previously we used, just variant soft. So I think I want to just start by trying let's try I like the primary one. So let's see what way we need to do that. So we would need to do preset tonal primary. Okay, so we're going to do that. We're going to look at our code here, and we're going to come in here and say, okay, this is what we're replacing, variant soft. So we're going to do variant soft, and then we're going to replace it with preset tonal primary, which is the new class, the replacement for that. And you'll see that's going to replace things in a lot of different places. And so before I hit apply, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back over here so that we can see this in action. So I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to say, apply the change, replace, and then anywhere in the application that those were previously being used, there we go. Our button now has that background. Okay, and sorry again if there was a bit of a cut there. I realized we've got a storm blowing in outside, and so it's getting a little dark in my office. Thought I'd turn the light on, help everybody be able to see me. So we're back with that. Okay, so picking up where we left off here, we now have, potentially a number of buttons updated throughout our application. We jump to a couple other pages. They're probably going to error, because we haven't patched those up yet. But at least this one reference it got updated. Looks like there was 14 in total, so 14 different buttons or presets, that we've updated there. And we can always just kind of look at them. If they don't look quite the way we want them, we could undo those changes, that kind of thing. But for the most part, I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so without further ado, let's kind of just clean up what we have in our code here, because we are not currently using the accordion there, so we're going to leave that just temporarily, just as reference. We're not using this button. I'm going to get rid of it. That looks good. Let's see what other buttons we have. So down here we have a variant filled primary. So again, that's another place that we were using kind of the old variant styles. That needs to be updated to the new version. So we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to come in here and say, hey, we're going to do that. Primary, let's see, preset filled primary. It's a little bit different in syntax here. I'll make this a little wider. Previously, there was just one primary tone for filled. Now you can do things like the 500 tone, which is kind of the center point. You can do color pairings, so 50 and 950. Like there's quite a few options. And so when I say presets have more options, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. But for this one, we're just going to keep it simple. We just want it to be the primary 500 tone. So we're going to apply that, do that, and then come look at our application so we can kind of see that happen. And then there we go. There's one of our buttons updated. And so I kind of like that. There may be some things I want to tweak or adjust to that, but for the most part, it's doing what we want to do. We're kind of replacing those old styles in bulk and easily kind of replacing them with kind of whatever the new variant or new style is that we want to do. The thing I'm thinking about is that I kind of like the neutral style, which looks like this. If I toggle light and dark mode, it's kind of like not necessarily white and black, but it's a very high tone, very, very contrasting tone that might stick out a little bit more. And I think that's what we kind of use on our homepage here. Yeah, where we use these kind of very like bright, high contrasting kind of, tones. We use very like neutrally style with like outlines and stuff. So I might tweak and adjust a couple of those styles. But just to get everything kind of in a functional state, we'll leave this as is. Okay, so that leaves the big thing on the page, right? The accordion. So let's take a look at what the old accordion structure looked like. And so we can look at it both in our application code here. Remember, I pulled it off to that little separate file. This is our page, and then this is our accordion. Let's see, I'm going to bump this a little bit over so we're not using so many line indents. We have the component imported. It's accordion items or child components. This uses Svelte fragments or slots, which is, again, we talked about that a moment ago, something that's changed pretty dramatically in Svelte 5. So that's going to be a change we need. And then we have all these little like items within. And so I'm going to go ahead and just bring that back in. I'm just going to copy all that code, put it back in place here. It's going to be failing, obviously. It doesn't have the import. The import is turned off here at the top. Let's go see what the new import is. That's probably the best place to start. So we're going to go to the accordion documentation, so components, accordion. And we're going to see, make sure you have Svelte selected here. You can select, React or Svelte or whatever. And we're going to just look at the basic example. So in the code here, you're going to see a few things with just the new version. One, there's this very simple streamlined import statement. So we're just going to copy that and bring that over. And we're just going to replace that in our current file. So do that, drop that in. You can see that's now coming from not the Svelte package, but not the core skeleton package, but the Svelte specific component library, right? So that's one big change. The other change is that previously we had accordion and accordion item, right? But that's no longer the case. If we look here, we're doing something a little bit different with the component API, whereas we only import accordion, and then items are sort of like using this dot notation to kind of denote the child items for that. And so that's kind of a cool change if you've never seen that approach, because what that does is it allows us to, when we want to import and put a accordion on the page, we can of course kind of do the syntax like we're used to, and then we can do this dot and then see like a suggestion of the options that are available. So if we do item, there we go. And see, okay, now we have the item there, and then it's going to tell us, oh, you need like a value, right? So you need something that kind of denotes what is making this unique from, compared to its siblings, things like that. So we can kind of get that very kind of cool sort of tooling that's kind of, providing some of that information. But all we really need to do down here is just make sure that we're following that new structure. So we're going to say accordion item, and we're just going to replace each of these with the new version here. So that looks to be good. If we come back and reference our source here, we'll see that the sections inside that were previously using a Svelte fragment have now been updated to use snippets, which are the new Svelte 5 syntax, right? And so we need two types of these really. So I'm going to copy the control and the panel, and then we can kind of compare this, right? So when this is working the way we want it to, the summary and the content should now be control and panel per each one. So I'm going to just do this. I'm going to copy the snippet. And again, we're going to try to replace these in bulk as much as possible. So we know the close tags are all going to be, slash snippet. We're going to copy this. Okay. I'm just copying those. And we're going to copy the first couple here. And replace. There we go. Do the same thing here. Replace. And there's multiple ways you can edit these. You can just go line by line if you prefer. I'm a bulk editor kind of guy, so we'll just do all of these. There we go. And yeah, one more. Okay. And with that, I think we should have everything updated. Oh, it is kind of telling us there's a couple things it doesn't understand or doesn't like. We're going to remove the auto collapse, and we're going to remove open. So those are values that likely have changed or they're no longer present, right, on those particular components. So we're going to save that. But if we come and look, the page is now loading, and we have our accordion. So that's using the new v3 component and working pretty darn well. I will say, let's see what this error is this message is coming at the console. So it's saying contents to shift around in the browser pairs HTML will likely result in a hydration mix match. Okay, that's interesting. It's also talking about the logo, which is being pulled in here. So it has a non-closing section tag. Let's go take a look at that. Maybe that sometimes these things can kind of domino, and we'll go take a look at that. So that's going to be in our a custom component, I believe. Logo anim section, yeah, right here. So again, SvelteKit is providing more testing, more accessibility, things like that in place. What it's wanting is it doesn't want that slash. It wants the full tag to be in place. So if we apply that, hit save, all those console errors have disappeared on us. And if we look at the page, everything still looks fine. So that's the change, okay? Anything else that's kind of sticking out here? The image is looking good. The button's looking good. These labels are looking good. Our hover states look good, so that's nice that that's all working. Yeah, I'd say that's working pretty darn well. Okay, so we've got our first page kind of migrated. It's looking pretty good. The only things that are kind of sticking out to me is I kind of feel like the footer is kind of lost here. It doesn't quite stand out like I would want it to, and the header doesn't quite look the way that I would want it either. So let's go take a look at the header first. I'm kind of curious to see what's going on with that. So we're going to come in here. We're going to go back to our layout page. We're going to open our header file. And I'm going to go in here and look and say, okay, what colors are you using for this? And so here's one of those changes. Again, another small subtle change that's happened is right now the surface color for the dark version is using shade 900. In Skeleton V2, that was the darkest version of the color you could get. So if we want to see that in our docs, we can come in here and look at our documentation for colors. We'll go colors here. 900 is the darkest shade for surface or any tones that are available. But if we compare that to V3, go in here and look at colors, sure enough, there is a new 950 shade that's an extra step further than that. And so I think that's the problem. That's why that is so light colored, is that's not set to the correct value. So I'm going to change that from surface 900 to 950. We're going to look over here, and as I save it, let's see what it looks like. Sure enough, there we go. Now we got that nice kind of looking, kind of darker style header. I think in our case, we're using transparency as well here for this. Let's see what that looks like. So what does this look like transparent? It looks pretty nice. I kind of like that. I was going to say I might take that away, but that actually looks really nice. We have the button states look a little off here. So if we look and kind of compare again to the old version, this is supposed to have kind of an active state, and these are supposed to have hover states. Those aren't quite working the way we want to. So if we're going to look at the header, we're going to say, oh, look at there. We've got more variant styles going on. So we're going to change this to preset filled, which should look really nice. I'm going to save that. And let's take a look. And now we have this nice kind of filled in button here. And if we look at the hover state, it's using a hover state, but it's not quite working the way we want it to. And the reason for that, it looks like it tried to change, but we've got primary, so we've got a little typo there. So let's just make sure we're not doing that anywhere else throughout the application. So let's do that. Remove the extra primary and update that. There we go. And then if we go and look, there we go. We now have our little like kind of states there. The other thing is the buttons seem kind of small. So if I look at the buttons, I'm going to see what does it look like if we remove that small state. And yeah, that looks much nicer, much thicker, kind of chunkier buttons. Looks like our logo is also still kind of using an old color. It looks like it may be hard-coded there. So that's something else I'm going to need to look at. So let's go check out where that comes from. So we've got the logo right there. We've got, looks like a field path. Yeah. So right now it's hard-coded to a value. So what we really want to do is we want that to update with the theme. So anytime you have any fixed colors like that, try to do this where you go in here and say fill primary 500, and then if we come and look, there we go. Sure enough, now that text is in blue. So everything's feeling much more consistent, much more, closer to what it looked like on the Cerberus theme on the V3 Docs site. If we compare now, it's pretty close. It's in the ballpark. We're using some different styles for the buttons and things like that. But, for the most part, it's working pretty nice. The only thing I kind of don't like is I don't like that those hover as a primary tone. So I'm going to come in here and we're just going to get rid of primary. We just want to do preset tonal, which is just the neutral tone. And then now, there we go. Nice neutral tone. Looks really sharp, honestly. There's this little kind of glow that's going on here that doesn't quite look right either. If I look, that's because we're doing a custom shadow. I'm just going to remove that. And there we go. Now we just have this nice kind of fixed button styles for that. So the active state is working for all of those. Looks really nice. Image obviously still needs to be updated. I'm going to save that for now. We'll come back and revisit that. I'm still kind of iffy on this homepage button style. This is just me being nitpicky now, but I'm a bit of a perfectionist sometimes. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to go preset field. And then we're going to look and see. Yep, there we go. Now we have this kind of nice, fully colored button. In fact, I think I want most of our buttons to look like that. So anywhere we have a button, I'm just going to use that as the button style. And that just gets us that nice kind of like, neutral tone color. And in fact, if I want to come back in here and look at my light mode version of this, there we go. You can see that now looks pretty nice. It's using the light mode of everything. Looks good. There is still that issue with our footer though. It's not standing out. It's kind of getting lost in there. So I'm going to open both our header and our footer. And I think I'm going to borrow, there's a border that's being applied here. I'm just going to borrow that border style and drop it in here. And make sure this is border top. Okay, there we go. I'm going to save that. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, there we go. And now we have that little separation between the content and the footer. The other thing I've noticed here is we've got another style that's changed. This is our old color pairings. So if we look at the V3 pairings, come in here to the the V2 docs. We come in here and we look at design tokens. We get a section called color pairings, which are colors that kind of pair for the light and dark mode iteration. So in light mode, it's this. In dark mode, it's shade 900, on and on and on. All these different pairings, right? The structure for that looked exactly like this, where it's like, okay, it's a background color. It's going to be using applied to the surface tone. These are the shades for light and dark mode, respectively, 50 and 900. And then it has this little like dash token class at the end. And so this right here is one of two changes that I want to point out. One is the token suffix there is no longer part of our API, our syntax for our styles. So if we come and look and we go to pairings, yeah, we can go down to color pairings, kind of shows all the different options here, and we can look at the syntax. It's basically the same, it just doesn't have dash token at the end. So any class, not just color pairing, any class in Skeleton that previously had that dash token, that's no longer a thing. So we're just going to go in here and we're going to come, let's look at the code. There's the whole class, this dash token suffix, that's what we're going to change. We're just going to take that and we're just going to replace it with nothing. So any class that was previously using that extra little suffix there, it's like, yeah, just make sure that's several different places. And we're going to replace that and take a look at what that looks like. It's still not going to make a change for us for the footer here. And the reason being is we ran into this before. Shade 900 is no longer the darkest tone. So 950 is the correct pairing. 50, 950 is the correct pairing. And if you're wondering where I'm drawing that from, again, color pairings, we have all of that kind of detail here. 50 and 950 are the pairing. 50, 950, 50, 950. That's the pairing. So 50 and 900 is not a correct padding. That's not a class that exists, and you're not going to get any kind of results if you do that. So I've made the change. We're going to switch over. I'm going to save, and you're going to see the footer change, maybe just subtly. It's pretty dark, so it's not going to change much. If I go up a step, 100 and 900, that's the next kind of color pairing. We're going to see that footer is now kind of a little bit more visible. Okay. So we'll leave it 5950. It's just blending in with the background, which is the same color. But again, we want that solid just in case there's ever a more intricate background that's going on that's going behind that. But for the most part, that's looking pretty good. Okay, so one page done. We're going to go through the next couple pages. We're going to go through these a little bit more rapid fire, just because we're going to be doing a lot of the same things over and over. But let's go to services. I'm going to close out the page. And we're going to look here and say, okay, go to services page, and let's just take a look at what's going on here. First of all, we're using an avatar component that's no longer coming from that location. We're going to comment that out. It's going to point out several different places where that's now failing for us. So let's maybe go ahead and address that first and foremost. We're going to come over to our v3 docs and look at our new avatar component. And make sure we choose Svelte, choose the import here. We're going to copy that in, replace our old import with that. And then let's look at the structure. So the structure is actually pretty much the same. It's the same component name. It still uses a source. There may be some extra settings that we might want to tweak or adjust, but for the most part, it's pretty close. We come down here and look, we now have these. It's complaining because it doesn't understand the width property. And the reason for that is that the name of that property has changed. It now uses size. And so if you're not familiar with the two, let's see, and then the width 40, the actual class has changed here. Okay, so what else is it saying? Okay, so it needs a name as well. So we're going to say name equals GitHub, name equals Kofi, or coffee, I don't know how you pronounce it, and then name equals Patreon. Okay, so mostly in the code, it's going to tell us what it needs there. So I'm going to save that. We're going to come over and look at our page. We now have our page functionally working again. These are the three avatars we were just updating. Those are the ones that weren't loading. And so those are now back into a functional state. So again, the changes that I made, changed the import. The name of the component is exactly the same as it was before. We're no longer using the width. We're using size, which is a property in Tailwind. All sizes is the same as width or height, but it just applies both evenly. So if you set that width is set to this property, height is set to the exact same value. It's really good for any kind of square size elements, or, in this case, a rounded square, which is our avatar itself. Okay, so that's that in a nutshell. The other thing is just the name of the actual avatar here. And the reason we're doing that is that is used to generate the fallback, the little placeholder value. If for some reason the avatar image isn't loading, you will see, this value right here that's generated via the name. So that's why we always kind of require that. Plus it can be used for the alt tag and things like that. So multiple ways we can use that information. Okay. So with that, our component is working. If we compare this to the services page from before, we're going to see, oh, there's a couple issues here. Like this is supposed to have some styling that doesn't look like it's there. It doesn't look like it's working. Our list styles look a little bit different. We're using that kind of colored button, but maybe want to go with the kind of neutral tone. And for some reason, this image is not centered. So that's a little bit weird, but something we can take a look at. Typography looks pretty close. The size change you're seeing there is just change for the theme itself, not anything that we've done as far as the classes we need to modify or anything like that. Okay, so let's go take a look at what's going on with these little like hover sections right here. Okay, so look at our code. We make sure we've saved all these changes. Here's that button at the top, that higher button. So we're going to just go ahead and make that just a preset field, just for the neutral tone. And then we're going to look at here. And so it looks like we have hover. So, okay, on hover, it's trying to use preset tones. It's trying to use the preset hover values. And so let's see. Look at the old version again. Just I want to compare. Okay, so by default, it has a kind of a card style, and then that changes when you hover. Okay, so let's try preset tonal. So it should be tonal by default, and then on hover, it should be the primary tone. Let's take a look. Okay, so there we go. We now have both of those working. And so there's the neutral tone. I come back over, and we're just going to bring that tonal tone here to the second card and to the third card as well. Okay. And then all that should now be working. Oh, that looks like that's not wanting to work. Okay, so it looks like we've got another little issue with the second and third cards. Let's take a look. It looks like the find and replace did something funky for us. So we have primary, secondary. So we'll fix that. And we'll fix that one. That should just be preset tonal, tertiary, and secondary. Save that. Look at that. There we go. Now those cards have that kind of cool, neat little hover state again. I'm also going to look at our lists. Let's see. Lists, they are using a canned list style that we previously provided as part of Skeleton. That's no longer part of Skeleton. That's been removed. So if we come in here and we look at our v3 docs, we search for list styles, for example. You can see, okay, that's the list component, not quite what I was looking for. Should be under typography, list. Yeah, there we go. So we want something a little closer to this, right? So if we look, what we've done is we've done away from the canned class coming from Skeleton and just replaced it with Tailwind primitive classes, utility classes that Tailwind provides. So what we're going to come over here is just do this, and we're just going to copy all three instances where we use that and just replace that with the list styles. I'm going to come back over here, and when we save those, yeah, there we go. That should look pretty nice. It looks like it is also applying an extra bullet that we don't really want. So I'm going to do list instead of list disk. I think it's list none. Yeah, if I do that, there we go. No extra bullet. The bullets are handled by the row itself. And yeah, I think that looks much nicer. It's not, again, it's not one-to-one with what it was before, but it's just kind of in that ballpark, and that's what we're aiming for. Okay, so that page done. The About page should be a simple one as well. There's not too much going on here. We have a little block of text, and we have two avatar components with some, looks like some buttons here that open to, social accounts and things like that. So let's go over to our code. Let's close the service page. Let's open the About page. And yeah, same thing. It looks like it is wanting that avatar import. So I'm going to copy that again, replace that again, come down and look, change these to be size equals size 48. And then I think these already have, it looks like alt tags. So I'm going to change that to name and save that. And then if we look, sure enough, there's our page. Now, clearly those cards are not displaying properly yet, the little blocks that we had. The reason for that, by the way, in case I might have skimmed over that, is if you look at the card styles, we don't apply a background color as part of the card style by default anymore. It's like buttons or badges or those other components where you have to supply that yourself. It's in a ghost state, right? An empty state where there's no background by default, in the case that that's what you want. It also makes it easier to where you don't have to try to override these presets, styles that are built in and stuff like that, which just works much better with Tailwind's precedent system. So if you're wondering why cards are like suddenly not having backgrounds and stuff, that's all that's going on there. So we're going to come in here and we're going to take a look. So here's the mission card at the top, which has a card style. And we're going to do preset tonal maybe as the kind of neutrally style. Yep, there we go. That now has a style which it didn't before. And then likewise, I'm going to copy that and bring that down to this card and this card. I'm going to save those, and we're going to see both of those update and now have their little backgrounds, which looks really nice. Let's see what else is off. That looks fine. And then really that leaves one more page, so we're almost done. We're almost at the home stretch here, which is this contact form. Contact form is going to be fun because that has our inputs. So you might be worried like, oh, am I going to have to go up and update all of my inputs and all my field styles and all of those things? For the most part, the answer is going to be no, because a lot of the, like the card or button, the syntax for that has not changed. It's just any kind of extra decoration that's going on. And so we're going to come in here, we're going to close the About page, we're going to open Contact, and just do a quick look and see if there's any components that are failing. Okay, yeah, we were using the avatar component on here as well. So I'm going to bring that in as well. Let's fix that real quick. I'm going to leave the old import just for reference, just real quick. Looks like something's going on with our text area down there. We'll need to fix that. Size goes to size. Name goes to Chris. Because it's a picture of me that we're replacing here. I'm going to save that. Actually, let's look at the page. Right here. I'm going to save that in the background. And there we go. We now have what looks like our page is working, which is a little, all the styles are a little off. There's a couple things we need to address. I know what the issue is with these inputs, so we'll go fix that real quick in just a minute. So if we come and look at our V3 docs, we're going to go here. We're going to go to form and input styles, and then you're going to see, okay, these look closer to what we're wanting. And so there is a prerequisite step here, which is that we need to install the Tailwind Forms plugin. And so you can obviously follow the instructions here to install that in your project if for some reason you don't already have that. It's usually installed as part of the CLI config. And then the other thing we need here is we just need the plugin kind of added to the list. And they kind of show it displayed in this sort of older format. But there's a much simpler way we can do this now. And so if we come and look at our kind of documentation here, we can just import that requirement here, that plugin. We're just going to pull it into our config. There's the import. And then we're just going to take forms and just kind of add that to the list as a list of imports that are provided there. I'm not going to save this. We're going to come back over and I'm going to open the page so that when I save this, which I'm about to do, we're going to save. And sure enough, there we go. We now have our inputs styled a little closer to what you might expect. As you kind of select those, they've got the correct hover states and things like that. I will say these kind of lines are a little bit kind of, there's obviously like this kind of background that's missing. So that's another card style we're missing. Let's come back over here and look at the form. Let's fix this little issue here while we're at it. Okay, it doesn't like the early close tag. We're going to do that. That should fix it. Okay, and then come in here and look at our form. Yeah, there's our style. So we're using a card. I'm going to do preset tonal, and then we're going to go over and save and see what that looks like. There we go. Okay, that looks pretty nice. Okay, so there is one more small change here. So you're going to notice how we have a label class here. We have a span for the labeled text. And then we have the inputs. So there's an extra little class that Skeleton now provides here. And I'm just going to put these in place. I'm just going to grab all the span tags. And we're going to go class equals label text. And then before I save that, we're going to jump back over to the page. I'm going to save. And you're going to see just a small subtle change to the kind of typography on those labels. This makes them a little smaller, affects the kind of spacing there. It makes them a little more subtle. So just an extra class. You don't have to add it, but adds a little bit of, panache there. So I think we might be done. I think we might have it. So one of the things I obviously like to do anytime I've kind of completed a change like this is we're going to go and open system settings here. And since I don't have a light and dark mode toggle, I'm going to use the operating system version. I'm just going to toggle that there. And we're just going to scan through and look at anything that looks off in the light mode. Sure enough, looks like we have some text that's missing up there. So let's go fix that up real quick. So I'm going to jump back over to the application. That's going to be as part of our header here. And it looks like it's the text, our logo text here. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this and we're going to go, okay, we don't want to use the fill. We want to use a class that we define. It's going to be fill. We'll go with surface because it's a kind of nice neutrally toned. And we're going to do kind of an opposite of what we typically do for color pairing. We're going to reverse the values. So what this is going to say is do a fill color that's surface. In light mode, it's 950. And dark mode, it's 50, which means dark and light, respectively. And I'm going to come back over here and we're going to save. And let's see what that change looks like. Save that. And there we go. Now the text is visible. So as I toggle between the light and dark mode, we can still read the text skeleton there. So that looks really nice. And that's just an SVG, just a shape that we're using there. So let's make that one final change, and I think we can wrap this up. So if we look at our button here, it looks like on hover, it was using the tonal primary. I'm going to just come over here. We're going to take a look at that. That's what that looks like. I'm going to save the change, and then there we go. Just a kind of a nice neutrally look. If we return that back to our dark mode, there we go. There's what that looks like. And again, those buttons were kind of small, like the ones in the header. So I'm going to make those bigger. Yeah, looks a little nicer that way, and that looks good. I'm going to go back over here real quick and just jump through the migration guide because we kind of left that aside and just kind of did this in practice. But you can see, this kind of echoes a lot of those steps that we covered. So that includes stuff like removing the old package, which we did, following the onboarding to put in the new package and configure Tailwind, which we did, updating your theme, which we did, placed it with a new theme, the Cerberus theme, right, which changed some of the color values and the balance a little bit in a few places. We addressed those kind of classes as we went. We replaced the app layout with the AppShell, which was almost a one-to-one there, which was really nice. We updated all kinds of design, utility classes. There's quite a few changes in there. In fact, if we come back to our code, we can kind of close out of here. We can see we've got 15 files with changes, and if we kind of just scan through there, we're going to see a lot of the same thing over and over, changing these preset values to the the variant styles to the presets. That's going to be what's going to go in on a lot of places. We're changing the components, maybe adding or changing a couple properties on those. That will vary more on the scale and scope of the project, of the component itself. So like if we come in and look at our Accordion component, there's quite a bit more extensive changes, right? It's both like the name of the child component and the properties used, and we're moving from fragments over to snippets and that kind of thing. So again, lots of small changes, but most of it is pretty quick and to find. So a lot of times I was just pulling up the documentation myself, but just know we have kind of a reference in the guide here, so you can see, hey, these are what the old design tokens look, the documentation for that, and then here's the new. So like old and new, and you kind of quickly run through and kind of compare the differences for whatever particular class you're looking for. You can also say, okay, what are the old color pairings versus the new color pairings? We can kind of go look at those. So that's the old chart versus the new pairings that are displayed there. On and on and on. Just lots and lots of different places you can compare for utility classes. We also show a quick, example. So if you forget, like, what did that change look like for the color pairings? Oh, like it's mostly the same. We just removed the token suffix at the end. So kind of a quick summary of what we kind of did in a few places, actually. There was a couple of different places we had to do that. As far as Tailwind elements, none of the elements that we were using in our application really changed. But there are a few I wanted to call out here: alerts, breadcrumbs, lists, and logo clouds. Those are no longer provided by Skeleton. In that they are no longer provided as like the button styles or the badge styles, like something we provide. The reason for that is we just felt like these were not primitives for Skeleton. These were not primitive classes. We want to keep things we want to, the most basic types of classes that we can do that have the most kind of reusability to them. So if we're providing these like really detailed, complex interfaces, like alerts that uses like buttons and it mixes icons and it does, does all this stuff. Logo clouds, especially, like there's this like more complex UI. We just wanted to strip that out. What we've done instead is we now provide essentially little mini tutorials that teach you how to build those with the primitives that both Skeleton and Tailwind provide. So rather than just kind of having these canned built-in styles, kind of like the list that we looked at, right? We can now come in here and look and say, oh, I can just use normal Tailwind classes to kind of lay that out. I can use the anchor styles to kind of give me like a style for that little anchor link. Use opacity if I want to kind of, fade out the icon or whatever. Use my own icons. And the code, like the actual like changes there, it's almost one-to-one with what it was previously. So if we come in here and look at like the markup that required to create breadcrumbs with our element styles, you're going to see it's almost one-to-one, if not less even, with just using these standard styles. And that's, again, twofold reason. One, we want to keep things very primitive, and two, if there's not really a net gain from us, abstracting those for you, then we're just not going to do that. So just a few that to kind of keep in mind that those are now gone, and you will need to replace that with the options that we list and provide here. Tailwind blocks. So these are sections that were, again, more complex interfaces, like the chat UI that we provide. We provide for kind of like a opinionated way of how you can build that complex interface. We're still doing that. We're still going to have those. We just don't have those guides ported to the V3 docs yet. So you'll have to kind of look at the V2 docs or look at your current implementation and just look at like, oh, this is a utility class for a button or input or something that I might need to tweak or change. So we will have those updated guides for you, but that's the kind of thing that when I say there's still things between now and release, that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. We do have image layouts, though, so you can at least see what I'm talking about. So this is the old form of image layouts and kind of how we laid those out and what styles we used compared to the new ones, which is very similar. We're just using, we just kind of cleaned up the code a little bit to make it look a little nicer. So that's the translation, or that's the kind of updates and moving those to the new documentation. Components. This is the big one. This is the one that's going to be the most difficult for most people, just given that there's an untold number of changes that we just cannot document every single change because they're so foundational. There's changes, and we do provide at least a list here to kind of explain why or what changes have been made. And so I'm going to run down those because I want to make sure that that's very clear for folks, because it is important to understand that, which is, one of the main changes we've made is we needed to adopt the Svelte 5 API. So we needed to be able to use runes. We needed to be able to use snippets. We needed to be able to use, on and on and on, these new features that are provided by Svelte 5. And in order to do that, it meant we had to rewrite these components. So if we were already rewriting the components, we figured why not just improve everything we could as we go. And so the next thing we did was we implemented Zag, which we've had kind of a previous update in the past. Kind of look at the video logs or the update posts on GitHub. You'll see us talking about Zag. I think it's linked in the document. Yeah, it's linked in the guide I was just looking at. But what Zag is providing sort of like almost like headless components that we can then take and implement as our own components in Skeleton. But they are framework agnostic. They're implemented in a framework agnostic kind of centralized manner. And then there's versions of those available for all the major kind of component libraries. So if we want a React component or a Svelte component or a Vue component or a Solid component, they provide all of that kind of logic and state for us. And then we just provide the design system, Skeleton, on top of that. So it's been a huge quality of life improvement for us. There's a lot of new components that are going to come out of that. We're very excited about that. Of course, changing to the new package, so that import path is going to change, which we've showed several times during this process. Renaming or changing the structure of the components. We saw that with the Accordion. That's kind of happened in a lot of places. Changing, new features or new properties. We saw that with the avatar component. Things like the size property changing, replacing with that. And then, just changing to follow new conventions that we've established that should hopefully help carry us over the next couple of years. So the style props convention, if you haven't already seen that, we link to that I highly recommend you read through this because this gives us some predictability with how you apply styles, not just to your components, but to each individual part of the component all the way within. Because a component is not a single thing, it's a tree of elements, right? And you need to apply styles all the way throughout that tree. So this is just our kind of standardized way of doing that. So we're just adopting those new conventions. So again, another breaking API change for some of the properties that you provide the proper, what props you use to provide those classes and styles down into the component. We show a quick demo of what component, what it looks like to change, everything from the import to using the state rune to, changes on the, functionality where it was ticked before, but now it's markers and there's additional values you provide, stuff like that. We also call out all the specific changes that are big changes. So things like the AppRel component, which is one we had previously here, which is, kind of looked like something like this, has now been replaced with what we're now calling the navigation component. And it can do all the same things the previous version can, but it can do more. Like it has an expanded mode and it has a horizontal layout that you can use for mobile and things like that. So it's, the very similar to what it was before, but it's grown in scope in quite a ways. Several components have been renamed just to kind of bring those in conventions with standard web, component naming. There's a lot of browsers are starting to adopt these names for, native elements and things like that. So we're trying to kind of borrow and follow along. I won't list everything else here, but just know there's a couple others. Stepper is going away. It just never felt like it fit, stuff like that. The other thing that's being nixed is the Svelte actions. So 2 of these actions are just primarily using built-in native browser APIs. So they're just trying to build new cookbook guides, those little recipe guides or little quick tutorials that show you how to use the native APIs. You don't need a Svelte specific action. We'll replace that with something framework agnostic, which is really nice for our React users and everybody else. Focus Trap is a feature that will be provided by both Floating UI Svelte, Floating UI React and Floating UI Svelte once that's ready. So those are those new integration libraries we're using for popovers and modals and stuff. So that's getting replaced. It's going to live in a different place, but there is a replacement coming for that. And then the last thing is our utility features. And so these are kind of big, heavy features is how I would describe them that we provided in the previous version of Skeleton. And so a lot of these, what we were doing, we were integrating third-party, libraries anyways. And so we're just taking that next logical step and building proper integration guides for these tools. So for popovers, we were going to continue to use Floating UI. We're just going to show you how to implement it more directly for things like modals and drawers and things like that. Those are going to come from that same Floating UI integration. Code blocks, we're going to use a tool called Shiki. And Toasts, we've got a couple different solutions for that. Table contents, kind of a little tutorial for that, on and on and on. So just, again, I won't list every single feature, but just know those are some of the reasons why we're changing or removing some of those features. In pretty much every case, as you can see here, we're trying to kind of provide an opinionated alternative. There's only a couple places, really just these 2, where we just don't have a direct, here's the solution for you. But that could come in the form of a tutorial guide or something like that in the future. But anyways, this is obviously probably gone way too long, but I hope this has been super helpful for the folks that are trying to come through and learn the process for migration. Obviously, there's kind of a lot to it. It's going to go quicker for you in practice, likely because you're not having to talk it all out like I am. So if I would have just sat down and done this, it probably could have been a 10-15 minute thing. But that's because I'm kind of intimately familiar with what the changes are before and after. For somebody else, it'd probably be 30 minutes, or something like that. But again, I just want to make sure it's clear. This is kind of the way it works. This is the process that you go through. Here's some strategies that you can use to make your migration process easier. And then the end result is you end up with an application that is upgraded to the latest and greatest. If you feel that's too hard, too out of scope, maybe consider that rewrite that I was talking about earlier, where you just kind of start from scratch and just reference the v3 docs and just start a new application from the ground up. So a couple ways you can do that, but again, hopefully this is useful. If you have any questions, reach out in the comment section, both here and the written post, the announcement that's going to go out. And again, just hope you enjoy V3. We're working really hard to get those last few things done, and we're really hoping to have it out to you by the end of the year. Please enjoy, everybody. Thanks.